quite some years ago, I remember in the Western meditation groups, there was a kind of understanding going around that the Buddhist teachings, that the Buddhist practice is not based on faith, as most of the other religions and spiritual systems actually are, but that the Buddhist practice is based on wisdom, on deep understanding, on the First Noble Truth, the truth about unsatisfactoriness, which is our everyday experience. And I think it is true. But the question remains, how far is it true? So, some memories coming. Some 20 years ago, I was in the Asian monastic school together with a number of Asian monks. They were quite young, about 32, 33 years. But they had already Dhammacharya examinations, that means a higher examinations in the theory of Buddhism, of Theravada Buddhism. And also they already had a successful meditation, so they were preparing themselves. They were actually learning English, preparing themselves for the Western Buddhist missions to come to West to spread Buddhist teachings. I was there to learn some Abhidhamma and also language. But in the Asian monastic style, these monks learning English, actually, they were learning pages of the textbooks, of the English textbooks by heart. So they had quite some vocabulary, they could read, but they were completely unable to communicate. So in the evenings, sometimes, I was animating kind of a discussions to bring them to speak, to ask questions, to make answers. And usually I was choosing some topics for our discussions, which I was sure they know already very well, that they know it better than me. So that I supposed it would be more easy for them to understand and to communicate. I remember one evening which I want to start this talk with. I choose the topic Saddha. And in the Asian Buddhist countries, this is a mental quality, very highly respected, faith, trust, confidence, Saddha. So Asian people actually are very much familiar with that. Mainly they are approaching Buddhist practices, Buddhist teachings from this angle of faith. And so I started, me being a rather rational person, started with the kind of throwing a kind of an argument on the table, that Buddha did not need any saddha, did not need any faith, because he had such a strong insight, such a deep understanding, or even seeing the reality, everything as it really is. So he did not need to believe into the things, because he knew them. It was quite evident for him. Sort of presenting my case like that, and I noticed that the monks could understand what I was talking, but, in the gentle Asian way, it was quite clear that they don't agree with me. So I brought more strong argument. It's like this. I don't need to believe that this room has a door, because anytime I look there, the door is there. It's evident. I don't need to believe it. Making the point quite strong. And the monks, no, no, no. So after the lesson, I was looking into my books, Abhidhamma Sangaha, which is the compendium of the whole Abhidhamma, in a way. And there was a kind of a table of all the chittas and cetasikas. Chittas are the kinds of consciousness, and cetasikas are the mental concomitants or the mental factors. And of course I could find the Lokutara Chitta, which is the consciousness becoming aware of Nibbana, Magga Nibbana, Pala Nibbana, and finding the consecutive column with all the cetasikas. Wow! There was lots of cetasikas there, Sobhana cetasikas, all there. And these are the beautiful, beautiful mental concomitants, starting with Sada. So actually the Buddha is the example of Sada in Buddhism, of the faith, of the trust, of the confidence. And this was for me quite a very important turning point to start to understand this quality of mind, Sada, faith, trust, in a completely new light. Because with my Catholic background, of course, as a small child, we were in the hours of catechism getting some credo, to believe into this and this and this, to believe into something. So for me, until that point, the faith or trust was mainly oriented towards the conceptual area, to believe into something. But from this point, I started to understand that the Buddhist Sada means something much, much bigger than that. That it goes far beyond this kind of a blind believing. That it goes rather into something which I would compare with a very small child. Perhaps it cannot yet speak, but when you look into the eyes of a very small child, this enormous openness, positiveness, trust, and the strength which is behind that kind of a mental quality. So the Buddhist Sada mainly is in the, I would say, over-conceptual sphere, beyond the concepts, believing into something. No, it is rather the heart which is open to something which is bigger than myself, than my little ego. This was a very important lesson for me. Only later I encountered, giving some retreats, so also there were some quite serious Christian people in the retreats, and we were discussing these things quite deeply. And they were quite clear that in the modern theology, Christian theology, it is the same actually. Believing into something, it is rather the initial stage of faith, of the Christian faith in this case. But later on, it becomes the living direction, the living energy. Actually, the meaning of Sada etymologically means something like to apply or to put your heart onto something fully. I would compare it to the situation, especially in the meditation, when you are just fulfilling the instruction as it is given, you know, and it is quite a dry kind of struggle. And when the sada, this inspiration of the heart comes into play, suddenly your praxis start to fly, and the struggle becomes a glide. Reminds me of my experience I would like to share. It goes back again some 30 years perhaps, as a layman. Joseph Goldstein was teaching retreats in Switzerland quite frequently at that time. Sometimes he would speak about his experiences with his teacher at that time, because he was still practicing. And at that time it was a Burmese monk, very stern teacher. And Joseph sometimes was sharing the impossible task, a very difficult task this teacher was giving him to overcome some difficult passages in the practice. So I was listening with my ears big like this, because at that time I happened to be in a similar situation. My practice was blocked almost like with a wall of concrete. And so taking part in some intensive retreat, perhaps to 2-3 days, it would go, I would gain momentum, but then instead of progressing further, it was like hitting a wall where the mindfulness would almost jump off into wandering mind. And that was the whole retreat after. And it was quite frustrating, and it was actually going on for some years like that. And so listening to these stories with that particular teacher, you know, I got so inspired. This is somebody who can help me. So when I got the news that this particular monk is giving a retreat in Germany, in a Vajrayana center in Germany for about 10 days, so I was rushing to apply for participation. And I remember how I was preparing myself for that. I had a unlimited trust into the competence of this particular teacher. I knew it is an Asian teacher. There will be lots of devotional stuff around it. We will have to bow 3 times slowly. All these things which at that time, with my rational technical mind, I did not like at all. I was doing it, but it was not really my area. And I was clearly deciding for myself, this is an opportunity of my life. Get rid of all these mental resentments and don't get limited by these thoughts and criticism. Just flow. And indeed, in that retreat, in that particular retreat, again, the first 2-3 days, you know, quite gaining momentum, then the mind started to hit the wall again, but with the help of sada, of the great faith and kind of a full swing with the situation, I really overcome this particular difficulty in my practice, and the wall open up, I can say illustratively. And what was there was enormous pain. So I started to experience this enormous burning of the body. And that was actually the wall. Completely beyond conscious mind. I did not feel anything. It was just the mindfulness arriving at certain intensity, just jumping off of the practice, it was all subconscious. The fear of confronting the pain. So actually, at that particular retreat, I only started working through this difficult part of my practice. I had to finish it in the later practice, coming through. So this is what I want to share: the strength and power of Saddha and the importance in our practice. So at the beginning, faith and understanding, I thought these are contradictory qualities of mind. I thought when I understand something deeply, I don't need to believe it anymore, which is actually truth. And perhaps it's possible to say that this kind of faith, the conceptual faith, really Buddha did not have anymore, because he see how the things are. But the Saddha means much more in this over-conceptual sphere, this great opening of the heart. Underlying the importance of that. Now, when we go into the Buddhist teachings, the indriyas, the mental faculties, there are 5. The mindfulness is the, let's say, balancing factor. It's one of them, mindfulness, sati. And there are 2 pairs, saddha vispanya, the faith with deep understanding or wisdom, and the second pair is virya with samadhi. Virya means energy or effort with concentration or collectedness of mind. So today I'm talking about the first pair, saddha panya, balancing these 2 powers. They are great powers of the mind, great helpers, stressing the necessity that instead of being like this, that they should be developed to cooperate, that they should work together along our practice of Dhamma. The faith is sometimes also compared to the ducklings. If you have seen it, it's quite wonderful. When the mother duck brings the ducklings, newly born, to the water, you know how they are running to the water, and the joy which comes from that. you can see it all, how they flap their little wings. So faith, has lots of these qualities. Saddha also sometimes compared in the Asian tradition to the hands of the body. What are the hands to the body? The same is the faith or trust to the mind. It's a wonderful, wonderful comparison, because without hands you cannot do anything. So similarly, without faith we would not be able to finish anything. And sometimes we actually are not aware how much even the very rational and agnostic people, how much do they actually trust and believe things. Without faith, you cannot go even to the downtown by bus, because you would not have the trust that the driver knows the way, that he will not kill you in a car crash, that he knows to drive. This is all saddha. There are so many things we are purely believing, taking for given. Mount Everest is the highest mountain on the earth. Try to prove it for yourself. This is all saddha in our everyday life. In the scriptures, saddha is compared to the gem of the universal monarchs. This may be commentarial Buddhism. The legend goes that these universal monarchs have a very specific gem, And if this gem is thrown into muddy water, the dirt, the mud, very quickly settles down so that you can drink the water. So the sada is compared to this kind of a purifying faculty and power in the mind. And indeed, I was observing it many times when the Asian people coming to Buddha statues starting to bow, how they flourish from inside, how they start to radiate. This instant, pure handshake, I would say, handshake with a high level of consciousness, high level of purity of mind, which can happen almost instantly, indeed. Of course, it can vanish also pretty quickly. It's not so stable. But it's strong. It is very strong. Let's be clear that there are different intensities of faith, of sada. If somebody is born into a religious belief or just being inspired by some spiritual books or like that, that is, let's say, the first level of sada, which is can be quite strong, but it can be also overthrown by something else. Much stronger and much stable is the second level, which is faith which is confirmed, that the experience, personal experience, is confirming some parts of the faith. What was believed in suddenly becomes evidency. This may be the situation when somebody is practicing very well, and halfway there is a kind of a between state, which is an enormous opening. After quite a difficult passage through the practice, suddenly this kind of openness and the purity and the understanding is so brilliant. Vipassanupa kilesa called. There are 10 of them. Light in the mind, and understanding, wisdom, and mindfulness. The meditation goes very well in all situations by itself. So that is certainly faith which is at least partially confirmed, because one can feel, one can see it works. And the third level of faith is the unreversible way of faith, which comes with the first level of enlightenment, sotapanna. By definition, the doubt has been overcome. So the faith is a new level of existence of that particular being, of that particular person. Interesting exception are bodhisattvas, which are by definition in Theravada they are unenlightened bodhisattvas, but they are working towards Buddhahood, and their decision is so strong that even the process of death and dying cannot eradicate that kind of decision in their mind. So also belonging to this third kind of a very, very strong faith which cannot be overthrown. The sada, as well as the panya, as the wisdom, it has its shadow side as well as everything. If they are developed unevenly, out of balance, they are actually turning into a hindrance. So of course, if the faith, the trust, is one-sidedly exaggerated and there is not sufficient support by personal experience and wisdom, so it will end up with a kind of a cheap credulousness or fundamentalism, which can easily develop into fanatism, typical with the attachment to one's own belief. Very characteristic is also the intolerance to all the others which believe something different. We can see it in the Middle East very clearly. Even the other kind of misdevelopment, when there is a one-sided kind of reasoning and reflecting, so the practice, our practice has no strength. It starts to turn in a circle, just thinking, and not progressing anywhere. There is not the strength going through the whales of delusions. So the scriptures are very clear that always these pairs need to be developed in a balanced way. What we see in these days quite a lot, that people are dismissing any kind of rebirth or existence after the death of the body, that something continues and it is capable to call together some another mind and body. So, meaning exactly this, having open mind, not to be credulous, not to jump on these things, but also not to dismiss it automatically out of the table only because it is not exactly the position of the contemporary science. Probably it will take some more time until the science starts to broaden the spectrum, the knowledge about the extent of reality, which is enormous. Talking a lot about Sada, actually time to say also some reflections about Panya, which is the counterpart. To translate Pali word Panya into English with one word, I would probably choose knowing. But it covers many shades from information, knowledge, reflection, wisdom, insight, deep understanding. All that belongs to category of Panya. So the Buddhist teachings actually speak about three levels of Panya, three kinds of Panyas. The first one, Sutta Maya Panya, is the knowledge which we are acquiring from another people. Reading books, listening to MP3s, going to some lectures. Let's be clear that this one is already a very important part of the path itself. The first link of the Eightfold Noble Path is Samadhi, which means to have some kind of a proper understanding or orientation to take the right direction in our endeavors. And let's be clear that the original Buddha's path is a very specific, very unique kind of teaching. Very important is also the second level. Chintamaya Panya is the kind of knowing or knowledge which we are arriving at through our own reflections, through our own deep thinking, deep understanding. In the scriptures, this is usually defined as yoniso manasikara, reflecting about the underlying truth of the things, of the phenomena. And this is highly recommended by Buddha, indeed. There are some passages in the suttas when Buddha makes it clear that it is possible to arrive at the stages of enlightenment by that. But to be honest, the greatest importance in the teaching is given to the third level of Panya, Bhavana Maya Panya. And this is a kind of wisdom or insight we are arriving at by practicing and following the Eightfold Noble Path. Not only the intensive meditation, any part, any progress on the Eightfold Noble Path, any significant progress, let's say. So, wisdom or insight Personally, I understand insight, especially the high level of insight, that it is the work of Sada with Panya together, that they are leading the mind to the liberating opening. But in the scriptures, let's be clear that insight is also belongs to the category of Panya. Panya Vimuta, liberated by insight. But let's take first the wisdom. It is not the same. Wisdom and insight is not exactly the same. Of course, we have Western kind of wisdom, very much in the philosophy or like that. But the Buddhist wisdom has always very specific flavor. The Buddhist wisdom has always some relation to the three universal qualities of everything which is conditioned, everything which is subordinate to the time flow. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Yeah? These are three crucial universal qualities very much emphasized in the Buddhist teachings. Impermanency or changeability, instability. The second, unsatisfactoriness, imperfection of everything conditioned, and a kind of a hollowness, emptiness of selfhood. The third is quite a strong one, quite a difficult to grasp by logic. We can speak about it another time. So the Buddhist wisdom always has some relationship to this underlying truth. Generally, what I would say about wisdom is it has something to do with the life experience. Because what we call wise, that person can overcome the division by time, the beginning and the ending of things and events. Usually they are lying apart, but with the life experience, these things are more in the memory. Knowing how the things are beginning, knowing how they come to the end. Wisdom for me means like to see the both sides of the coin at the same time. And this would be actually valid even for the Buddhist wisdom. One good example comes from the Thai forest tradition. The great master Ajahn Chah, very well known for his intuitive wisdom. There is a story that at a time somebody donated a very beautiful glass to the monastery. It was assigned to a young monk. And very special, beautiful glass. With the time, this new monk started to develop a kind of attachment. Ajahn Chah noticed, but he did not say anything. One time it happened, this monk carrying a hot tea in the glass, it slipped out of his fingers and fell to the ground, broken. Ajahn Chah noticed the pain in the face of this monk. But he noticed only one thing. For me, the glass was always broken. This story may be adapted. It has been told so many times, and it may have happened in a different way originally. But let's be clear that the teaching of always broken glass was an important part of Ajahn Chah teaching. And let's be clear that it was not referring just to a glass or some very expensive teapot, but that was referring to all the objects of our attachments, especially the human body. Seeing the beginning and end at the same time, all the time. Perhaps important note to this. This kind of life experience or wisdom should not prevent us at all to enjoy the things as long as they last, of course. Not developing any attachment at any stage of the lasting of the things. Because any attachments will lead some kind of disappointment or suffering. So this can be said about wisdom. So now to say something about insight. The first thing which comes to my mind, to make it clear that insight is not thinking. Insight is an intuitive opening to the deeper layer of truth, deeper layer of reality. It's true that the process of thinking can lead to an insight, that wise reflection, the Yoniso Manasikara, can trigger an insight, but the moment of this opening, that's just a moment beyond concept. It's a seeing, it's a kind of a new perspective, new seeing. Something we can imagine if we have lived in quite a long time in a kind of a corridor, shadowy corridor, and then we notice, oh, there is a door. We open the door into a big hall. You know, this sudden shift of perspective. We can even look back into the corridor, but even then those things will appear in a different light. So pointing out this specific characteristic of insight. On the other side, also wanting to make clear that the insights will be gradually built up. That's the usual way how it happens in the reality. Then is a gradual path towards the opening. It reminds me a little bit of the Zen situation between the Rinzai Zen and the Soto Zen, the sudden enlightenment and the gradual enlightenment. So who is right? Well, both. There is a kind of a gradual build-up of the situation, and the opening is a sudden event. So making it clear that there are different intensities of insights, that's quite an important point actually. But also making clear that there are many kinds of insight. There are liberating insights to some extent which are not really connected to the Buddha's path. So not really giving much attention to that. There are preparatory insights. In the beginning of the practice, usually quite a number of psychological understandings reveals to the mind why I am like this, why the things are as they are, and so on. Lokiya insights. If we should speak about the insight, about the specific insights which are actually lying in the direction of Buddha's liberation, Buddha's path towards liberation. Again, similarly like wisdom, insights which are related to the three universal qualities of everything conditioned. These are the insights about anicca, dukkha, anatta, about the changeability, impermanency of everything. So insights going in this direction. Or the dukkha, the second quality, dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness or liability to suffering. That somewhere down deep in the roots of things there is always some imperfection involved. All this belong to the dukkha characteristics. And the third characteristics of everything conditioned is the absence of abiding self entity in anything, not self, absence of selfhood. So insights going in these directions, or even insights relating to the aim of the development, about Nibbana, or the three qualities of Nibbana, Animita, apanihita, sunyata. Animita means the unconditioned, signless quality, insight into that. Or apanihita, desirelessness, insights directed in this direction. Or sunyata, emptiness. Quite interesting is the truth that about the half of the correct insights actually are very difficult insights, difficult things to swallow, especially for the ego. Because these are the insights which are taking down our illusion, one-sided kind of cheap idea of beauty in everything conditioned, in samsara. So these insights are actually classified as quite important insights which are helping to detach from the root of problems. In the Visuddhimagga, it is the stage of Bhangajnana, quite a difficult insight, when everything starts to dissolve. And it can get really difficult. So the next insight, Bhayajnana, the insight of fear, existential fear. The next one, Adinava, the insight of misery, of danger. The next one, Nibbida, insight of disgust, of weariness, of fed-upness. And so making it clear that actually this kind of experiences, even in our life, have a specific role. They want to teach us to detach from things which are causing the suffering. Quite important thing. To see even the catastrophic events in our life, not only in the meditation, even in the life, especially for people who are already on a spiritual path, that the difficult chapters of our life have some purpose to teach us the other side of the things, that we are not seeing the things correctly. There is some attachments going on. In the Four Noble Truths, actually the cause of suffering, cause of unperfection and unsatisfactoriness, that's the second Noble Truth, the Tanha, which translated into English means something like thirst, desire, attachment. So why to speak about insight? I think you know it. Don't be attached. Let go of your attachments, of your desires. Good advice indeed. It may work very well in the field of our consciousness, of the things we are conscious of, but very difficult in the roots of the problem, because these roots are beyond the field of our consciousness. We don't feel it, we don't know it. And the roots of attachments are there. In the scriptures it is called the area of asavas or anusayas. And this is exactly where the insight should work. Insight we can also understand as a direct confrontation with the reality as it really is. Not as the reality appears to us, not as the perception is presenting the things to us, but as the things really are on their own. And this is usually such a kind of shock for the ego that the detachment happens as a logical sequence. So, speaking about dire things along the spiritual path being important, let's be also just and make it clear that also joy is extremely important in our practice on our spiritual journey. But if we look into the scriptures, what Buddha is recommending, which kind of joy? It is a kind of joy which comes from purity, purity of mind, joy of sharing, joy of giving, joy of the Brahma Viharas, of the loving kindness, or of the emotional equanimity of the mind. The joy of deep concentration, this extreme purity of mind, or the joy of wisdom, joy of compassion, joy of fulfilling the heart, joy of detachment. So Buddha is clearly pointing towards the sources of pure joy, which is free of attachments. Buddha would not really recommend sensual joys, which are the usual source of our life, amusement. A little bit between is the joy which we can get from artistic experiences, which in Buddhism, in the original Buddhism, is not acknowledged. In the later forms of Buddhism it may be appreciated. But what I want to mention is the joy of nature, kind of a pure mountainous scenery or some lake in the evening. You know, this quite serene experiences in the nature, which also has not really much to do with attachment. But in my point of view, they are distorted. It is again this cheap kind of picking up the beautiful side of something which in its whole nature is really discutable. Because, you know, this morning promenade in the wet grass, it feels so fresh and beautiful, the bright morning. But that with each step you are killing ants and insects in the grass, which behind you are dying in a deadly agony. You don't see that one. Have you ever watched the fly which was flying into the spider's net? What happens then? I cannot get rid of the picture I have seen as a layman in a television about nature, about the sea life. There was a very young seal, a youngling of a seal, on the ice, dying because a shark bite a big portion of his belly. I cannot get rid of this picture. I even don't try. You know, okay, beauty of the nature, but take it as it really is. You know, don't take just the cream from the surface. That's the Buddhist way of looking at things, as it really is. You know, yatha bhuta, that's one of the chief insights, to see the things as they really are. Very important. Now, somehow want to close this talking, but yet there is still one point which I want to speak about. Sunyata, emptiness. It was mentioned as one of the characteristics, we can say, attributes assigned to Nibbana, Nirvana, empty. Let's be clear that the Buddhist emptiness is extremely positive quality. If we translate it into English as emptiness, in a way it's a correct rendering, emptiness. But in English language it bears this negative connotation with itself, something missing. But in the Buddhist understanding, sunyata means empty of all the undesirable things which can cause suffering, which are causing suffering. That's the real sunyata. To end up this long talking, returning to the initial quest, when the modern Western teachers would point out that the Buddha's teaching is not based on faith, as another religions mostly are, but on reality, on our everyday experience, on wisdom. Is it true or not? Well, it is true, but something is missing. You know, talking about saddha, the trust or faith, and panya, the deep understanding, the deep knowing, insight. What I want to say, that there is also the third noble truth, the truth of the end of suffering, the nibbana, nirvana, the full liberation. And because we are not there yet, we need to have this faith and trust into our own potential to go this way, to have the trust towards the teaching of the Buddha, that he was correctly attaining and teaching the path, and that we have the potential in our heart to follow that path. So again, even in the base of the Buddhist teaching, the faith is a very important factor, and again, making it clear that these two have to work together so that we can experience the blessings of Buddha's path as soon as possible.